This book, Irreversible Damage by Abigal Shrier, has been one of the most banned volumes in the last few years. Will you find it on the American Library Association's promotional banned books list? No, of course not. Why not? Because the ALA has become a fraudulent organization, a propaganda machine, falsely claiming itself to be a champion of intellectual freedom when it only promotes and hustles books reflecting its own socio-political agenda and neglecting or censoring those that don't. Irreversible Damage has been banned all over the place. Under pressure from the usual lobbying groups, the Target chain store openly censored it for a while, probably until someone in charge there read it. Despite being ranked #1 as a bestseller in some categories at its own site, Amazon refused to allow the book's publishers to advertise the book at Amazon. Dozens of Amazon employees reportedly wanted to ban Irreversible Damage from Amazon because it was alleged to violate the company's policy against books, quote, that frame LGBTQ identity as a mental illness, unquote. Aside from everything else, that opinion is actively censored throughout American society. A transgender professor of English, Grace Lavery, at the University of California encouraged people to, quote, steal Abigal Shrier's book and burn it on a pyre, unquote. Chase Strangio, a lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union, my have they changed, announced that, quote, stopping the circulation of the book is 100% a hill I will die on, unquote. When well-known podcaster Joe Rogan interviewed Irreversible Damage author Abigal Shrier on his show, some employees of Spotify, which hosts his podcast, demanded the episode be deleted. A Maine high school banned the book from its library. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, a Canadian gay pride group boycotted the Halifax Public Library because it refused to remove Irreversible Damage from its shelves. Over 3,200 people even signed a petition to remove the book from the library. On the other hand, in Connecticut, it took 46 people and an attendant news article to force the Westport Public Library to carry the book on its shelves, outrageously underscoring what kind of double standard censorship organizations libraries are becoming. This very same library endorsed one of the American Library Association's beloved banned books that it endorses to kids as young as 12, the controversial Genderqueer. The American Bookseller Association formally apologized for even including in a regular monthly mailing a promotion about the existence of Shrier's book. Shrier is Jewish. In Israel, LG etc. activists succeeded in getting the country's 2 largest book chains from carrying her volume. A conference center there even caved to lobbying pressure and canceled a scheduled talk. That's a pretty good banned book resume for Irreversible Damage. Top of the line, actually. So what are the leftist censors afraid of? It's a book that investigates the current rage of transgenderism, particularly among teenage girls who too often drown in a swirl of confusion on the internet's social media. And the book takes an ethical stand that the prone to censorship gay XYZ plus community doesn't like, particularly arguing against today's politically lobbied medical establishment, in this case per issues of transgenderism. Shrier argues that the systemic affirmation of any confused kid who wonders if they're a different sex is destructive and harmful. The book evidences that too many institutions of psychiatry have abandoned the world of science. They've been conquered by the woke victimhood movement. Young people are encouraged to diagnose themselves, no matter their age, and medical assembly lines merely push young people down potentially self-destructive avenues that are largely championed by political sex expansion propagandists and manipulators on the internet. This kind of book goes against the grain of the dictatorial world of political correctness and the LGBT etc. lobbying machine that wants to pull more people into its net to broaden its base. Misery loves company, does it not? So, what kind of treatment does the American Library Association give Irreversible Damage? A book every parent should read to decide for themselves about the issues at stake with the sexual identity of their children. An online search reveals that there has only been one mention of Irreversible Damage by the ALA ever, And this short reference occurs not in a list of prominent banned books that people should read, if even only on free speech principle, like other censored books it endorses, but briefly in a kind of aside at the ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom newsletter. In the entirety of the American Library Association machine, it sees fit to mention Irreversible Damage once, like this, in a single sentence fragment. New book, Irreversible Damage, is full of misinformation / psychology today. How the hell is such a comment evidence of the ALA's pompous self-celebration of being a bastion of intellectual freedom? This comment is, of course, the opposite of intellectual freedom. It is a naked effort to dissuade, to push potential readers away from the book, and is therefore itself a form of censorship. The implicit subtext here is, don't read this book. This brief ALA comment actually links to an article in Psychology Today where a guy named Jack Turban trashes Irreversible Damage. How totalitarian is this author in his worldview? Turban's trashing of Irreversible Damage even goes so far as to dismiss the book on the grounds that its publisher, Neri Books, is a, quote, conservative, unquote, publisher, and its stable of authors includes the sort that Turban-style leftist activists don't like. Its publisher alone, he argues, is reason enough not to take Irreversible Damage seriously. Turban dismisses the entirety of conservative thought with Irreversible Damage framed within it like this, quote, Shrier claims that her book is apolitical and that she is a neutral investigative reporter. Neri calls herself America's leading publisher of conservative books. Its other titles include The Biden Deception and The Conservative Mind. It boasts that its list of authors reads like a who's who of conservative thought and action, including Ann Coulter and many more, unquote. Guilt by association. So if you're on the wrong side of Turban's expressly political divide, you have no credibility whatsoever. Even Turban highlights here what his perspective is really about. Politics. Who is this author, Jack Turban? He's a psychiatrist, a gay one. Is that a surprise? And if Neri's conservative slant destroys Irreversible Damage's objective credibility, why doesn't Turban's personal and public posture as a gay activist destroy his?
And I also started working with transgender kids, and it was really just the most moving experience of medical school, and for me in particular, having grown up gay in Pittsburgh where it wasn't really accepted, I had kind of experienced firsthand how people telling you that your identity is a mental illness or bad or wrong can make a big impact on you.
Turban is a professor at Stanford and has a cottage industry specializing in transgender issues, particularly the affirming model that Shrier criticizes. He has created for himself an image as a go-to commentator for issues of transgenderism and is afforded the forum to express his opinion all over today's liberal mass media. You'll find online articles that are critical of him. He's been accused of conflicts of interest, that he's in bed, for instance, with some pharmaceutical companies that manufacture drugs using the transgender process. Another professor of psychiatry, Stephen Levine, with a decades-long list of achievement in the same general field as Turban, no academic slouch in the field of transgender issues, is a poignant Turban nemesis, once saying that Turban, quote, is an advocate rather than a scientist. A scientist looks at the data rather than a pro and con, unquote.
And what contemporary forces are driving the dramatic increase in individuals wanting to change their gender presentation in the last 20 years?
Well, look, I think a lot of doctors think this is crazy, but they are too afraid to speak up. Mayo Clinic just fired a doctor who said, hey, testosterone and transgender female athletes, that's not fair. And he was a famous exercise physiologist that basically sends a message. You got to be in line with the party establishment thinking on this. And we've lost our ability to critically appraise research.
So the short answer is that our recent article has been retracted by the publisher of the journal Archives of Sexual Behavior, where it was published. Retraction is something, I've never had an article retracted before, and it's something that I've associated with terrible things like fraud, plagiarism, grievous mistakes. None of that is true about our article. Frankly and honestly, our article was retracted because of the ideas and the evidence it presented that angered transgender activists and their allies, who pressured the publisher, who either agreed with them based on politics or chickened out or were worried about business concerns.
Are there oppositional views from experts in the fields of transgender, psychiatric, and medical studies that counter Jack Turban's views? Yes, of course, and the American Library Association doesn't want you to know about them. Here, in fact, is what the American Library Association formally states about intellectual freedom, that it includes the need to evaluate alternative sides of any given issue. In its own Library Bill of Rights, it proclaims that, quote, libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues, unquote. That sounds nice. It hits the right buttons. But talk is cheap. You've got to then walk the walk, and when it comes to free speech, the ALA acts like a paralyzed eel strapped in a wheelchair. Its posture for intellectual freedom is here, as so often, fake. Again, not only does the ALA omit Irreversible Damage, one of the most banned books in recent times, from its promotional banned books list, the ALA offers no alternative anywhere in the transgender controversy for members of the public to make up their own minds. It merely degrades, trashes a perspective it doesn't like. How deeply does such ALA censorship of books and ideas the ALA doesn't like go? So deeply, so freely, that its own hypocrisy bubbles up here and there like muck from a hot tar pit, not even remotely discreet or hidden, but so naked that its bold double standard about intellectual freedom is shocking. Let's look here. An ALA organization, its own LGBTXYZ lobbying group, offers a monetary prize for political activism on behalf of pushing the gay plus agenda or impeding anyone or anything that fights back. Never mind, I guess, that as a non-profit 501c3 organization, the ALA is supposed to be legally forbidden from being political or engaged in lobbying. We'll address its profoundly political, no revolutionary posture in another video. The gay plus community continually reinvents itself with new words and acronyms. Here, as usual, they make you genuflect, crawling across the alphabet with its GLBTRT acronym, meaning gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender roundtable. At the top of one of the ALA's GLBTRT pages, you'll see a bright red alert, a proclamation in behalf of intellectual freedom and an admonition to contact the ALA if you see a case of censorship anywhere. Well, la-di-da! Scroll down the same page and you see the ALA itself advocating for censorship, not only by the same organization that screams otherwise, but on the very same page that implores the viewer to report censorship. If the ALA is busy handing out awards to squash debate, it deserves a giant golden trophy at the very least for its audacious and arrogant hypocrisy, probably resting on the fact that anyone noticing this profound gaffe wouldn't dare to criticize the LGBTXYZ community, who are immutable in the hallowed victimhood gallery of the wholly oppressed, demanding, like secular popes, your unending deference and reverence. What linguistic standard to avoid deceptive shell games will satisfy a defender of the ALA's award to those who impede ideas that the dictatorial segment of the gay community doesn't like? How does an ALA defendant dance around what is staring them here in the face? Is the Merriam-Webster dictionary good enough to highlight what's pretty clear here? I quote, "To censor means to remove, block, or interfere with the communication of another," unquote. You want to quibble over the disturbingly obvious, somehow diffuse, explain away the naked censorship inherent to the ALA's impede term? Hell, impede is a lot closer match to block than to interfere, which, however weaker the latter may be, are both included here by Merriam-Webster in the censorship vernacular. Of course, the ALA's choice of impede infers an even stronger censorial action than the merely interfere option. So, behold, out of the ALA's dizzying world of two-faced censorial arrogance and duplicity comes the ethical impossibility of irreversible damage not making the ALA's banned book list, and the censorial dismissal of that book as being a compilation of misinformation you should not bother to read. A toast then, all you ALA free thinkers, to your sacred scam of impediments as a tool to enhance intellectual freedom, wherein distressing oppositional views be openly conflated into the only one that really matters to you, yours. You got a mind of your own.